Hello viewers, and welcome to episode 7 of F1 Talk. And as a little bit of a countdown to the season sort of video, I'd like to give you my list of favourite cars. I will be listing them in chronological order, and I'll tell you now that I don't have anything basically before 1988, which is basically when I started to notice Formula 1. So we begin in 1988, and I'll go through down to 2011. And beginning with 1988, there's only one car I can actually choose, and that's the McLaren MP4-4, driven by Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna with the Honda engine. Now, in my opinion, maybe apart from one other car, this is the greatest F1 car in history. It won 15 out of the 16 Grand Prix that year, and the mere fact that it was that good meant that both Prost and Senna were competing with each other for the championship. And that infamous crash into each other at Suzuka, I mean, just memories that stick with me. And I was 4 at the time. I knew that. And I knew how important that was at that age, that particular moment. But, as I say, what a car. And even if you put it at its best up against today's machines, it would still probably win. And it was the last of the turbocharged champions, that particular car. On a couple of years in the future now to the 1990 season, and the Ferrari 641, driven by Alain Prost and Nigel Mansell. Prost and Mansell, they drove their hearts out in that car. It was probably one of the least reliable cars that Ferrari ever made, and only their talent actually got it as far as they actually did. They managed to sort out the gremlins, sort of, and Mansell only just, you know, I mean, it was Senna, Mansell and Prost competing for the championship that year, and Senna won, but only blooming just. It's a good season, that one. And the car couldn't have looked more beautiful. It was, you know, more or less a perfect oval was the basic chassis shape, with the nose pointing down to the flat wings. We're still talking flat wings at this time, and the nose didn't have any bits leading up to it. It was just a flat nose going down onto it, and it was a beautiful car to look at, and especially with the number 1 on it, where Prost had won the title for McLaren the year before, and took his number 1 sticker to the Ferrari team. On to the year after, and the McLaren MP4-6. Now, this car had to be good because Williams were slowly but surely coming back at them. Nigel Mansell had rejoined them for the 1991 season, so the challenger that McLaren put forward into the 91 season so that Senna and Berger could drive it, it had to be good to beat the Williams Renault, because Renault had rejoined Williams, and the car was slowly but surely moving into the monster that would compete the following season, but they weren't quite there. Mansell lost the title by like 2 points or something like that, and that was at Adelaide where he lost that. He was so close to winning the championship, and Senna just pipped him to the post. And like I say, the Williams at that time was becoming the car to beat in, and it would be for the next few seasons after that. But McLaren managed to pull their socks out, get the Honda engine working, and just get Senna to the checkered flag first most of the time. Like I say, only a couple of points separated him and Mansell for the championship that year, otherwise Mansell would have been a 2-time champion. And speaking of Nigel Mansell and Williams, 1992, the Williams FW2310B. As I say, you put this up against the MP4-4 of 1988. I mean, okay, that had turbocharge, but if you put them together at their peaks, you know, at the peak of the FW14B, at the peak of the MP4-4, what a race that would be. What a race. I mean, you're talking the best of the best, in my opinion, there. And I think one other car could compete with that in more recent times, and I'll talk to you about that car a little bit later on. But this thing, powered by Renault engine, got 10 wins that season. 9 of them were Mansell's, and Patrese with the other win. And more often than not, Patrese would finish second to Mansell in the races. That's how good this car was. Only Ayrton Senna's brilliance could stand anywhere near this car. It was that good. It was that good. Those of you that remember the 92 season, Mansell dominated it. You know, if he didn't win, he was second or third. The reliability was bulletproof. And the mere fact it was good was because of the suspension trickery, so to speak, that everyone else called it at the time. It was the suspension that was brought in for that car. And other teams like Red Bull dominate now. Other teams struggled to keep up with them. Even McLaren at the time, you know, were considered to be the best car makers because they've won the championship so many times in the last 5-6 years previous to that. But that was the first car, I think, that Adrian Newey actually designed and you know, put in with the suspension. There was no way anyone was going to beat Mansell that year in the championship. On a few years now to my next car, the Benetton B195 from 1995, powered by Renault engine. Sadly, we've said goodbye to Senna, we've said goodbye to Mansell, and we've said goodbye to Prost. The new breed have started to come forward. We're talking Damon Hill, we're talking David Coulthard, and we're talking, of course, that year's champion Michael Schumacher. He and Johnny Herbert drove this one. It was a beautiful car, and it was that good that Johnny Herbert won 2 races that year. Not saying Johnny couldn't win races, and as I say, it's quite clear here that given the machinery, anyone can win a Grand Prix, you know. As a result, Johnny finished, I think it was 3rd or 4th in the championship that year, and you know, Schumacher and Hill went at it tooth and nail, but most of the time it was Michael getting the wins in the B195. Just a brilliant car, and I reckon he was sad at the end of that season to leave the team, because he had built up that relationship with them. Because the next car I'll talk to you about is his next car, the Ferrari 310, Ferrari F310 of 1996. At the time, Ferrari had not won a race since Canada the previous year, where Jean Alesi won in 95. But before that, they had not won a race for close to 2 years, and the Scuderia at the time were, you know, getting a bit impatient. The Tifosi were like, well, where's that bloody win, man? Where's that win? And, you know, Schumacher was brought in along with Eddie Irvine in 96. You know, they realised they were going to struggle for the majority of the season because they were going up against Williams. And, you know, towards, you know, the middle, start of the season to the mid-season, Williams' nearest challengers were McLaren, I think. But Ferrari pulled their socks up, and in a brilliant display of driving by the Rainmaster himself, he took the Spanish Grand Prix at Catalonia in torrential weather conditions. I remember it well with the teams saying, look, we shot this race, but Schumacher just went pow, straight down, won the race, and, you know, because of his driving skill, he came 3rd in the championship that year. And the same year, but a different car, the Williams FW18. Now, I think apart from their FW14B, it's easily their best car. They were, I think, Hill in the opening race at Melbourne, he and Villeneuve lapped everybody else. That's how good this car was, especially to begin with that season. Just a great car. Hill won the championship. Villeneuve finished second by about 4 or 5 points. And that's, as I say, that's how good the car was. And the next year Villeneuve just took the championship again rather easily, even though Schumacher and Ferrari were on their way up. Speaking of 1997, there's one car I really did like, basically because of its paint job. The engine had, it was the Jordan 197, piloted by Ralf Schumacher and Giancarlo Fisichella. This car, was nowhere near the best in the field. Was nowhere near the most reliable, in fact. But the Peugeot engine just coughed up more times than not. But the mere fact that I remember it, basically because of video games and classic season reviews that I watch now and again, it had a beautiful yellow livery on it that was more or less like a snake. The side of the front nose cone had 2 green eyes, and it looked like there was the snake's tongue underneath those eyes. It was a beautiful car, and I say that's basically the reason why it's in this list, basically because of its looks. That happens once more, and the rest of the cars are more championship winning cars or brilliant race winning cars. But on with the next car. And speaking of championship winning cars, the 1998 McLaren MP4-13 with the Mercedes engine, driven by Mika Häkkinen and David Coulthard. Talk about domination. Häkkinen finished the season with 100 points. I remember it well because I was keeping scores at the time, more detailed than I do right now. But Häkkinen won the equivalent of points to 10 victories. I know he didn't win 10 victories, and Coulthard backed him up like a good number 2 should. It was clear by, say, race 5 who was going to win the championship. The car was that brilliant. As I say, Adrian Newey at that time was at McLaren, and his technical dominance was just shining through. As I say, Coulthard, even he had more or less given up on the championship by, say, race 8. And that was his teammate taking charge. Häkkinen was born to be F1 World Champion. He finally managed it, and in such a dominant fashion. Like, she won 4 or 5 races in brilliant fashion, but Häkkinen just dominated. The car was brilliant, but like I say, doesn't compare to dominance later on, and I'll come to that in a few minutes time. The next car I want to talk about is from a season later in 1999, and it's the B.A.R. 01. Now, you may be thinking, well, why is this in there? And like the Jordan I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, it's in there because of the look. At the time, British American Racing were brand new to Formula 1. They had just bought out the team from Ken Tyrrell, who had retired from F1 and is sadly no longer with us. But they brought in Renault chassis builders, but because they were American, and in America you don't have to have the same livery on your pair of cars. So one car was one livery, which was sponsored by Lucky Strike, one brand of cigarettes, and another one was 555, another brand of cigarettes. Now, at the time, and these rules still are in effect today, you now have 2 different liveries in Formula 1 for your 2 cars. So what they did in a design thing point that was so ugly it was beautiful in my opinion, they saw, like, apart from the very front of the nose cone where they put a zip in to make it look like a zip, one side was the Lucky Strike and the other side was the 555. And it was horrible to look at, but in my opinion it was beautiful. It's stupid. Driven by Jacques Villeneuve and Ricardo Zonta, had a terrible season with the Supertec engine, the replacements for the Renault engines, but horrible at the time, but beautiful to look at, as I say. They scored no points, and they should have scored points, but because of the reliability of the car was so bad, they didn't score a damn thing. On to the year 2000 now, and there's only one car I can talk about. It's the F2000 from Ferrari. The car that finally clinched the world title after 20 years of waiting, at least 20 years of waiting, I think, and got Schumacher the world title. Ferrari's first world champion since Jody Scheckter. It wasn't the fact that the car was so good, it was the fact that it won the championship, and that's why it's in my list. The next car, the Williams FW23, and 2001, with the BMW engine, driven by Ralf Schumacher and new boy Juan Pablo Montoya. Ralf won his first race at San Marino. Remember it well, he just took the lead at the start of the Grand Prix. Not even Michael in the 2001 Ferrari could catch him. And Montoya won his first Grand Prix at the Italian Grand Prix not long after September the 11th. Just a great car. The battles, the on-track battles that Montoya and Schumacher had. Montoya had, you know, degrading words to say to Michael after nearly every a collision or near collision, and saying that he shouldn't be driving like that. From a non-Schumacher fan point of view, you could see where Montoya was coming from. From a Schumacher fan point of view, was saying, what the bloody hell are you talking about? But nonetheless, good car, took Ferrari to their limits in 2001, even though David Coulthard finished second in the Drivers' Championship. On to 2002 now, and I've got two cars. The first of these is the Ferrari F2002, a car that good that they didn't need to start the season in it. The F2001 was easily good enough to take on the first 4 or 5 rounds of the championship, but a car that good that they started 2003 with it, and it won the first 2 races in 2003. The obvious drivers at the helm with Michael Schumacher, Rubens Barrichello. Just a great car. Dominant, in fact, in 2002. By which I mean that Schumacher had won the championship by France, and that was unheard of back then. And we're still talking 10 points for first, 6 points for second. He had been that good that season that he had won the championship with about 8 rounds to go. It was ridiculous. That's how good he was that year. And his closest rival was Barrichello. But the other car I want to talk to you about, and I think you might actually guess this if you're an F1 fan, is the Minardi PS02. Not necessarily obviously not a race-winning car, but a points-winning car for Minardi, and that is why it is in this list of mine. Mark Webber scored a 5th place at Melbourne, his first Grand Prix, in one of, I would say, his career-defining moments, and the team actually celebrated, the whole paddock celebrated for him, because it was like a championship win for a team like Minardi. It's like the equivalent nowadays of HRT getting a points finish. Unheard of at the time. And I remember watching the review a couple of months back, and Paul Stoddart, which is the PS in the PS02, he said, because he was boss at the time, he said that the paddock, they didn't have any champagne, but the paddock actually went out and bought some for them so they could celebrate. Just brilliant story. I mean, crap engine with the Asiatech engine, but they got their points finish. I remember it well. Anyone watching this will probably remember that well. It was a great moment in Formula 1. And the true, what the true sport of F1 is all about. These minnow teams getting points finishes, getting a podium, possibly getting a win, like another car later on. The next car is the only other car that I can think of that would be qualified to challenge the likes of the 1988 McLaren, the 92 Williams and such. The Ferrari F2004 from 2004. Apart from, I mean, this was when Michael Schumacher won 13 Grand Prix that year. Truly stunning performance. Barrichello finished second in the championship. That is how good this car was. The F2004 was just a brilliant car. Schumacher, Barrichello just dominated the Constructors' Championship. Schumacher again, I think, won the championship by France or the next race after that. And the mere fact that Barrichello finished second in the championship by some considerable margin, they had won the Constructors, I think, by Silverstone. It was ridiculous. You know, McLaren were nowhere to be seen. BMW Williams were hardly anywhere on the radar as well. So that's why they won that season, and convincingly so. Another car next from 2004, the B.A.R. 006. And this car, if it wasn't for the dominance of Schumacher and Barrichello, Jenson Button would be a two-time world champion as we speak. Yeah, the B.A.R. 006 was the best of the rest. As I say, McLaren and Williams at the time were the two main threats to Schumacher and Ferrari's reign, because Renault was still on the way up, so to speak, and they wouldn't be good until the season after. But Jenson Button, Takuma Sato at the time, with Honda powered engines, took the fight to Schumacher and Ferrari, even getting pole position, Button's first pole position and B.A.R.'s first pole position at that time at Imola. And Button held Schumacher off until the end of the first stint, where they had to come into the pits. But after that, Schumacher just took the lead, bam, won the race. But it was a clear indication that B.A.R. were finally getting somewhere after 4 years in the sport. On to the next car in my list from 2005. Now, you'd think that because Fernando Alonso won the championship in 2005, that my next car would be the Renault from that year. But it wasn't the best car. The best car from 2005 wasn't a Ferrari. Shock horror. Michael had been at the front of the field since the year 2000, and in the process won 5 of his 7 world championships in consecutive years. But the best car in 2005 was the McLaren MP4-20, driven by Kimi Raikkonen and Juan Pablo Montoya. Most of the time, Raikkonen would be leading a race, and the only reason that Fernando Alonso won the championship that year in the Renault was the fact that the tyre rules for that year didn't allow anyone to come in for a tyre stop. You could come in for fuel, but not for tyres. You could change a tyre if it was right at the end of its life, severely blistered, almost punctured. A couple of times Raikkonen crashed out of a race because of these new rules that had stopped the McLaren winning the race. If the rules were the same as they were the year before and the years after, Kimi Raikkonen would be a 2-time world champion. The McLaren MP4-20, as I say, powered by Mercedes engines as they have been since 1995. Raikkonen would have won the title that year easily. Most reliable car as well. And if it wasn't for them tyre troubles, then McLaren would have another championship to their already successful trophy cabinet. On to 2006 now, and now Renault get a mention with the R26, driven by Fernando Alonso and Giancarlo Fisichella. Started off great for Fisichella, basically his tenure at Renault before having to switch. He actually won the Australian Grand Prix the year before, but it wasn't long when Alonso's talent started to shine through and take Fisichella over. Fisichella, I think, would win 2 races to Alonso's 9 or 10 over the couple of seasons, but he was taken to the end of the season, or close to the end of the season, by a resurgent Michael Schumacher, who with Ferrari had a terrible 2005, but 2006 was a brilliant championship. You know, first Alonso ahead, then Michael would get ahead, and it was like that for the championship. An engine blow in China, or Japan should I say, cost Schumacher the championship, and Alonso went on to win it by about 13 points or something like that. But all in all, great car. Alonso with his famous up to the camera and things like that. Great car, and you know, it was obvious why Alonso won that championship that year. Easily the best car of the season. Not many more to go now, and the next year produces the next car, the F2007 from Ferrari, from 2007. Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso, teammates at McLaren. This particular car driven by Kimi Raikkonen and Felipe Massa. What can I say? McLaren should have had the Constructors and Drivers' Championships wrapped up by Hungary, I would say, but because inter-team squabbles and the copying of Ferrari data by McLaren personnel, not saying all of them, by McLaren personnel, led to an investigation mid-season by the FIA and the stewards, and took the Constructors' Championship away from McLaren, which basically meant Ferrari had won the Constructors with about 6 or 7 races to go because of McLaren's disqualification. However, Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso were clear to still compete in the championship, and they both lost out by 1 point from Raikkonen, who, after winning the first race of the season, started to go a bit off in the early to mid-season, and then from mid-season he easily won the second half of the championship, and coincidentally won his first season with Ferrari at the time. On to the next season, 2008, with the McLaren MP4-23 or 23, whatever it is, powered by Mercedes, with no inter-team squabbles because Fernando Alonso had gone back to Renault. Lewis Hamilton took the championship on the very last corner in quite possibly the most dramatic finish to a season ever. Felipe Massa was his main contender that year in Ferrari. Massa had gone round the final corner and was world champion for like 30 seconds before Lewis Hamilton passed Timo Glock in the Toyota, went round and came 5th, coincidentally winning the world championship. Dramatic fashion, but all in all a great car. Took Heikki Kovalainen to his own one and only race win. Can't really say a heck of a lot more about the car. It was just reliable. It did what McLaren wanted it to do, and it's McLaren's final entry to this point in this particular list. Another car from 2008 now, the BMW Sauber F1'08, driven by Nick Heidfeld and Robert Kubica. Kubica got his first win after a horrible crash in the Canadian Grand Prix, where he was subbed by current world champion Sebastian Vettel. He came back, he won the race, and it won a race. That's how, and he was nearly challenging Hamilton and Massa for the top step of the Drivers' Championship. Didn't continue with the challenge, neither did BMW, because they were concentrating on the year after, but they had a horrible season, and as to date they're last in 2009. But if they had kept on challenging as far as 2008 was concerned, they would have won the championship. I think they were easily the quickest, but they weren't the best, which is why Hamilton and Massa then went, and Sauber went like that. So You know, had they continued, they would have won, but they didn't. Hindsight would be a magnificent thing, as it would have been for my next car. Only 3 more now, and 2009 there can only be one car to talk about: the Brawn BGP 001, powered by Mercedes engines, and you've got to say, in all things to be considered, driven by Jenson Button to the World Championship alongside Rubens Barrichello. At the end of 2008, Honda were pulling out of Formula 1 because of the global economic downturn. Ross Brawn saved the team, or the majority of the team, had to let obviously some members go and things, kept what he could, and then made the Brawn GP car. Now, because it was an entirely new team in terms of the FIA and entries, the new car and the new team were actually, and to this date, are actually the most successful team in Formula 1. They had one season and they won the championship and the Constructors' Championship in that season. So in my opinion, that makes them the greatest team in Formula 1 history. It should do, but it does. Button wins the championship 5 out of the first 6 races, and scores consistently after that, enough to keep his lead and win the World Championship. A great car, and you know, gave Button and Barrichello the confidence to win races on a consistent basis as well. The thing that could stand up to them was the Red Bulls, and that's basically all we have left. 2010, 2011, the Red Bull RB6 and RB7 consecutively, both driven by Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber. What more needs to be said? Adrian Newey designed cars with the Renault engines. Both times have made Sebastian Vettel a 2-time world champion, and Red Bull 2 times Constructors' champions. Adrian Newey, the technical genius, who quite frankly can't put a foot wrong at the moment, and hasn't. I mean, there's of Newey cars on here, there's at least 7 Adrian Newey designed cars on this list, and with good reason why, to be honest. Just brilliant cars. The domination of Vettel last year in 2011 was scary, and you know, Button finished second to him in the championship by about 120 points. That's how good the car was. I only get that domination in F1 when I play the game, for God's sake, never alone in real life. But the 2010 World Championship, you know, with 3 rounds to go, 4 guys could win the championship, 5 guys could win the championship. That's how F1 should be. But this last year, just domination by Vettel and Red Bull. Mark Webber finally won the last race of the year. Sebastian Vettel won, I think, 12 races, something like that, breaking the pole position record set by Schumacher in 2004 in the process. What's going to happen this year? What's going to be the best car this year? What's going to be my favourite car this year? I haven't got a clue. Let's have your opinions in the comment box, and let's also have your opinions about some of these cars that you know, about these cars that you think you know, should they be in this list? Let's have your list of favourite cars. What I'll also do is post links to pictures for some of these cars in the video description, and hopefully you can have a look at those and to see the evolution of the cars as, you know, time goes forward. So thank you for watching. I know it's been a little bit of a long one, but favourite cars, and my next video, edition 8, will be my favourite drivers from 88 to 2011. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.